It's July. Your cucumber vines look like they're winning. The trellis is full. The leaves are dark green. New yellow flowers still open every morning, but the basket tells a different story. In May, you were picking cucumbers every few days. Now you move the leaves aside, check under the same flowers, and find half as much fruit. So your hand goes to the fertilizer. Same product, same schedule, maybe even a little extra this time. And that's the quiet trap. Because in July, a cucumber plant can look healthier every week while producing less fruit every week. The leaves get darker. The vines stretch longer. The plant looks like it's responding, but it may be responding to the wrong instruction. Not because you neglected it, not because the plant is weak, not because the fertilizer is useless, because the plant has crossed into a stage most fertilizer labels never mention. And that stage doesn't arrive on the same week for every garden. A cucumber in Florida can already be deep into fruiting, while a cucumber in Michigan is still building the body it needs to carry fruit later. Same crop, same month, completely different nutritional moment. That's why a fixed fertilizer schedule can look responsible in June and quietly cost you the July harvest. And there are only 3 places to look before you add anything else: where the plant is in its life cycle, what the fertilizer label is actually telling it, and the one yellow leaf clue most gardeners read completely wrong. Miss them, and the plant keeps looking healthy while the harvest fades. Catch them, and the same vine that slowed in July can keep setting fruit into August. What keeps a cucumber plant producing through July and August isn't the amount of fertilizer you apply. It's whether you're applying the right kind at the right stage, and that stage arrives at a different time depending on where your garden sits on the map. There are 3 things that decide whether a fertilizer schedule is helping or quietly working against the plant. Get all 3 wrong, and the plant keeps looking healthy while production drops. Get them right, and the same plant that slowed in July keeps setting fruit into August. But before the zone, there's something happening inside the plant right now that most fertilizer schedules were never built to account for. Picture a gardener in Tennessee. June, the vines are flowering heavily, small cucumbers starting to appear at the base of each bloom. She's fertilizing on schedule, all-purpose every 2 weeks, the same product she's used since transplant. By July, the leaves are the darkest green they've ever been, but the number of new fruits forming has dropped sharply. She assumes the plant needs more and adds an extra application. The fruit count doesn't improve. The leaves get darker. She's done everything right, and the plant is still pulling back from her. Cucumber plants don't have a single set of nutritional needs for the entire season. In the early weeks, nitrogen drives everything it builds. The leaf canopy strengthens the stem, creates the structure the plant will use to carry fruit later. That's the right signal at the right time. But once the plant moves into active fruiting, high nitrogen becomes the wrong signal. It tells the plant to keep investing in leaves and new stem growth instead of redirecting energy toward the fruit it's already carrying. Applying the right fertilizer at the wrong stage isn't neutral. It sends the plant in the opposite direction from where you need it to go. Research measuring actual nutrient uptake across a full cucumber growing cycle found that the plant draws down 145 pounds of potassium per acre compared to 90 pounds of nitrogen. Potassium, not nitrogen, is what the plant needs most once fruit development begins. McCollum and Miller, Journal of the American Society for Horticultural Science, 1971. A standard 20-20-20 fertilizer delivers equal amounts of both. A plant in active fruiting needs potassium nearly twice as high as nitrogen, and a fixed schedule is delivering the wrong ratio at the moment it matters most. And this is the part most fertilizer guides don't address: why the same product that worked in May can work against the plant by July. But before the fix, if you've been fertilizing on schedule and the plant is still slowing down, this is the reason. The answer starts with what most gardeners are applying too much of at exactly the moment the plant needs less of it. When production slows, the default move is more nitrogen. Yellow leaves nitrogen. Weak stem nitrogen. Not enough fruit nitrogen. That visible response is real. It's also misleading. Research measuring what happens when nitrogen levels run high during flowering and fruiting found the opposite of what most gardeners expect. When the N-P ratio in the soil shifts because of excess nitrogen, the number of female flowers decreases, nectar volume per flower decreases, pollen density decreases, and pollinator visits drop directly as a result. Fewer pollinators, fewer fruit set. Not because the plant is sick, but because the nutrient signal it's receiving is pointing it in the wrong direction. Vaudot et al. Scientific Reports, 2022. Applying more nitrogen when the plant is fruiting sends one signal: keep building, more leaf, more stem, more canopy. The plant responds exactly the way it's been told, and fruit development moves down the priority list. High nitrogen during fruiting pushes more canopy, more shade, fewer female flowers, and smaller young fruit. And from the outside, the gardener sees the healthiest looking plant of the season just before harvest disappoints them again. The plant looks its best at exactly the moment it's producing least. That's a nitrogen signal that hasn't been corrected. Commercial growers have understood this for decades. They shift fertilizer formulas by growth stage: nitrogen heavy early, phosphorus forward at flowering, potassium dominant through fruit development. It's not new knowledge. It just never made it into the guides written for backyard gardens. Matching the formula to the stage the plant is actually in, that's what determines whether July produces fruit or just more leaves. And the stage changes weeks earlier or later depending on your zone. But there's one more part, and this is exactly what makes the right schedule for Florida look nothing like the right schedule for Minnesota. Before moving forward, look at the fertilizer you're currently using. What's the NPK ratio on the label? If it's a balanced formula 20-20-20 or anything close and your plant is already setting fruit, that's the first thing to reconsider. Not the frequency, not the amount, the formula itself. Switching to the right formula for the fruiting stage still won't land correctly if you make that switch at the wrong time for your zone. That timing gap is the part most guides skip entirely. Gardeners in zones 9 and 10 need to make that transition 3 to 4 weeks earlier than gardeners in zones 5 and 6. And the reason comes down to what heat does to the plant's internal timeline. A cucumber plant in Florida is not living in the same July as a cucumber plant in Michigan. One is already racing through fruit production. The other may still be building the body it needs to carry fruit later. Same month, same seed packet, completely different plant timeline. Heat accelerates the plant's internal clock. A cucumber in zone 9 or 10 moves from vegetative growth into flowering 2 to 3 weeks earlier than the same variety grown in zone 5 or 6. If the fertilizer schedule doesn't move with it, high nitrogen is still being applied when the plant has already shifted into a stage that needs potassium. Zones 5 and 6 Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin. Short summers. The plant needs maximum time building leaf structure before it transitions to flowering. Stay nitrogen heavy for the first 5 to 6 weeks. Shift to phosphorus around week 6 or 7. Move to potassium by week 8 or 9. The danger here is switching too early. Cut nitrogen before the plant has built enough canopy, and you slow the whole system before it's ready to fruit. Zones 7 and 8 Tennessee, North Carolina, Arkansas. Longer heat, higher temperatures. The plant stages 1 to 2 weeks ahead of zone 5 and 6. Nitrogen heavy for the first 4 to 5 weeks. Shift to phosphorus at week 5 or 6. Move to potassium at week 7 or 8. The danger here is the long summer itself. It creates the feeling that the plant is still in early growth when it crossed into fruiting weeks ago. Most nitrogen mistakes in this zone happen because the season feels young when the plant is already old. Zones 9 and 10, Florida, Texas, Arizona, Southern California. High heat compresses everything. Flowering begins within 3 to 4 weeks of transplant. Nitrogen heavy for only the first 3 weeks. Phosphorus from week 3 or 4. Potassium from week 5 or 6, held through the rest of the season. The danger here is that the plant outruns the schedule entirely. It moves faster than any printed guide accounts for, and a gardener following the label is already 2 stages behind. The same cucumber variety, but what it needs from the soil depends entirely on where it's growing, not the date it was planted. Knowing the right zone and the right stage still isn't enough if you're reading the wrong signal on the leaves and applying the wrong correction because of it. And misreading that signal is the most common mistake gardeners make when the leaves start going yellow in July. You know the right stage. You know what your zone requires. There's one variable left, and it's the one that causes gardeners to apply the wrong correction even after they've gotten the stage right. When cucumber leaves start yellowing, the first response is almost always more nitrogen. That reflex makes sense on the surface. Yellow leaves, deficiency, nitrogen, it's a logical chain. The problem is that nitrogen deficiency and magnesium deficiency produce leaves that look nearly identical from a distance. Both begin on the older leaves lower on the vine because the plant pulls mobile nutrients from older tissue to supply younger growth higher up. The difference is in the veins. Nitrogen deficiency. The entire leaf yellows evenly, the main veins, the side veins, the tissue between them. One uniform color from the leaf edge to the center. Magnesium deficiency. Only the tissue between the veins turns yellow. The veins themselves stay dark green, creating a clear green and yellow pattern across the leaf surface. If the veins are still green and the tissue between them is yellowing, that's magnesium, not nitrogen. Applying more nitrogen at that point doesn't fix the problem. It pushes the NP ratio further out of balance and moves the plant further from productive fruiting. Magnesium deficiency runs more frequently in zones 7 through 10 because high temperatures and heavy irrigation flush manganese from the root zone faster than cooler conditions allow. If you're in zone 7 or higher and seeing yellowing in July, look at the veins before you open anything. The veins tell you what the plant actually needs. Check them before reaching for fertilizer. Start with your zone, not the fertilizer bag. Here is the sequence in the order it gets applied. Start with your zone. Zones 5 and 6. Nitrogen, heavy through week 5 or 6. Phosphorus at week 6 or 7. Potassium from week 8 or 9. Zones 7 and 8. Nitrogen, heavy through week 4 or 5. Phosphorus at week 5 or 6. Potassium from week 7 or 8. Zones 9 and 10. Nitrogen, heavy for 3 weeks only. Phosphorus from week 3 or 4. Potassium from week 5 or 6 through the rest of the season. When you see yellowing, look at the veins first. Veins yellowing with the rest of the leaf nitrogen. Veins staying green while the tissue between them turns yellow magnesium, not nitrogen. Correct accordingly. Zone first. Formula second. Leaf veins when something looks wrong. And the next time you stand at the edge of that bed in July, you'll know exactly where to look first. The next time July comes and production slows, you won't stand there wondering if the plant needs more. You'll know what stage it's in for your zone. You'll check the leaf veins before you open anything. And you'll know that the fertilizer schedule needs to move with the plant, not stay fixed at where it started in May. A garden fed on a fixed schedule will keep slowing down every July until the schedule changes. That's what changes after this. Getting the fertilizer right solves the nutritional side. But nutrition only reaches the plant when the roots are active enough to take it in. Cucumber roots have a specific soil temperature threshold below it. Whatever you apply sits in the ground and waits. There's a reason gardeners who are applying the right formula at the right stage for their zone still see slower uptake than expected during early morning hours. And the reason isn't the fertilizer. The next video covers exactly how soil temperature affects cucumber root absorption and how to check your soil temperature before each application, so nothing you apply goes to waste.